kind intro. Hello and welcome everyone to the CEE Innovation Track. My name is Irina and I'm the co-founder of The Recursive, an independent media reporting on the progress of the innovation ecosystems in our region. The growth of the startup ecosystems in this so far very underestimated part of the world is kind of our why we started our media business, and I'm very honored to host today's talk on the discussion on that matter. Today with me, I have some very special guests. Let me introduce them to you very shortly. Beata Vereshova is the Director of Startup Department at Czech Invest, the investment and business development agency in Czech Republic. Julien Kosturi from Fil Rouge Capital in Zagreb. Amongst many other activities in the Western Balkans, Julien is also a founder of the ABC Accelerator in Ljubljana. Sergio Popa, Executive Director of the Spheric Accelerator in Cluj-Napoca, a very active ecosystem builder, not only in Cluj, but also in whole Romania. Julia Hoxha, founder of Zana. Additionally, Julia is spearheading the working group for health at the German AI Association. She is also an ambassador of Women in Voice Germany. But she's also the founder of the first co-working space in Tirana and a co-founder and a senior advisor at the Albanian Institute of Science. Very active members of our communities, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi,
everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us or having me.
So as you have been observing it, for the past, let's say 10, 15 years, we have been steadily building the startup ecosystems in Central and Eastern Europe, product by product, fund by fund, deal by deal, accelerator by accelerator, and now unicorn by unicorn. We now see the results of these efforts. I think 34 unicorns have been counted by a report from Dealroom, Google's for Startups, and Atomico, 12 of which announced only in 2021. Investments in CEE-born startups have more than tripled compared to 2020. And it is, I would say, quite an impressive bottom line. And I'm going to start with the first question to all of you. What, in your opinion, were the main factors for this sudden upsurge in Central and Eastern Europe? Maybe first I will give the word to Julien.
Okay. Well, I think I'll give you a bit of a longer answer. I think you need three elements, really, if you want to compete with the Silicon Valley. You need the talents, and Europe also always had them. You needed the money. And as a direct answer to your question, this is the big change. In my opinion, the money has poured into the ecosystem in the last 5 to 7 years. And the last point you need, and I think we still don't have it very, very developed, is the shark buying the smaller fishes at the end of the food chain, which is something where the Silicon Valley is still very much ahead of us. But I won't touch on that point. So I think, clearly money. I would just caveat that a little bit by saying that too much of this money, unfortunately, has been public. We see a lot of EIF funds, and don't get me wrong, it's amazing to have that. But I'm a little bit sorry it didn't go even bigger, in the sense that I still see a bit of a gap with what I would call private money. So a short answer is the big change is money. There is money in our ecosystem now. There are investors, there are pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B, private equity. Everybody is active. There's a kind of an awakening to the fact that early stage tech can deliver value to investors.
Thank you, Julien. Beata, would you agree that it's been because of the money that has been pouring in our ecosystems?
Okay, absolutely. I cannot deny the fact that without money, we can all have enthusiasm. Actually, lack of money can kill the enthusiasm super quickly. So absolutely, the money is something like the air for these businesses. If you don't have it, we don't have to talk anymore. In the other hand, I think only the money would never create such an ecosystem. So I think that we needed some kind of pioneers who believed that there is something more beyond life than just to go to work and fulfill the wishes of your boss. That you should become an entrepreneur. That there is a different mindset in life. That you can create. You can change things. You are capable of inventions. You are capable of doing something huge and great. I think this is something fundamental, that the mindset changed, that there is a hunger for doing something bigger than me, bigger than my daily life, and something that I can put on my grave. Here lies Beata, and she did this and that. So I think this is a huge mindset. I have no idea where is it coming from, but definitely there was some kind of hunger to create more out of businesses and to change the world. I know it sounds cheesy, and definitely the sprinkle on it is money that helped it to grow.
I couldn't agree more. I definitely believe that success stories shape the next success stories, and they give us confidence and inspiration. We see that very clearly in Romania. Sergio, in your opinion, what were
Yeah,
the factors?
if I look specifically at Romania, indeed, having capital available is quite important. But I think one of the interesting shifts that happened, especially in the technology field, is that companies have actually moved from just creating software and being outsourcers to actually building their own products. And I think a lot of companies have actually started to realize this, that there is more value to be delivered by developing their own products. And obviously now they have the opportunity to expand internationally. And I think the figures that we've currently seen from the unicorns is actually, these are the first movers that have gotten products out of our ecosystem and into the international markets, and they were able to capitalize on the products that they built. So I think this twofold move into building their own products and expanding internationally is what actually helped achieve what we currently have.
So, to summarize so far, capital, growth mindset, product thinking. Julia, I'm very curious about your answer, because what you're doing is pretty much dependent on R&D, which is still...
Yeah, we are very R&D based. But coming back to the question, of course I agree with Julia and Beata that this money coming and flowing. But I think the question is, why is this money coming? And so to understand the underlying reasons, so that ideally we can replicate this in also other countries. And I'll also try to raise the topic about that what we see right now, it's really good, but it's not representative of all the East, South of the Central Eastern European countries. However, so going back to the question, why the money is flowing, I think it's not something, an upsurge of the year, of the just 1 year. Of course, it's a steadily growing ecosystem. And because the internal money hasn't been there, we know that the majority of these startups are bootstrapped. So of course it has built their talent, it has built their confidence, it has built their skills. And I think another very important aspect that we should capitalize on, especially in Eastern and Europe and Central Eastern Europe, is that we have fragmented and smaller markets. But what helps is in the vision of the startup founders to build from the first steps products that are aimed at global expansion. And I think I agree with Sergio in this point, that this has shifted in the mindset. Instead of just outsourcing and building on-demand software, the vision now is to build software with the target of global expansion, because the market are smaller, which is also similar to the Israeli startup scene. And of course, this builds up the ecosystem, it attracts investors, and then we have the flywheel effect. The region becomes more attractive and more money is flowing in. So this is for me the reason, the analytics, so to say, is the mathematician behind the thing. But I also like to point one other reason. why we also see a surge, not only in CEE, but also Western Europe, US in general, of the money being invested. COVID has also accelerated and triggered digitization. So this is something, it of course came with all these disadvantages that we shouldn't necessarily mention here, but it of course accelerated and gave this special need for digitization, as well as to bypass regulation, a lot of regulatory frameworks. So a lot of things were being pushed. And this, especially for the CEE startup scene, where we're very good at process automation, fintech, and also enterprise software. This is the key where this digitization and this triggering also plays a role. So of course the money was invested there. However, maybe in the later stage, I'd also like to not spoil the party, but this is not representative of female-founded startup because the COVID has seen a surge, a decline, but maybe we'll raise this in the later questions.
You brought up many aspects that we're going to dive a bit deeper now in the conversation. I'm going to start with Beata. So, Yulia, you mentioned that the CE ecosystem is actually not one ecosystem, but we're still kind of very fragmented and very national based. So, in this sense, Beata, in your role at Czech Invest, you're also working very actively in creating these bridges between the ecosystems and building international networks for the founders. In this regard, do you see other countries in Central and Eastern Europe more as a competition or natural allies?
I would say that would show a little, a too little mindset if we would say that everybody around us is a competitor. I cannot even imagine how we could work. I would say if you are confident that your startups, your product, your country is capable of doing something interesting and contributing to the innovative ecosystem in Europe or in a global scale, you don't care about these kind of, sorry to say, but little things like who is the competition, and you don't see threat in any in every single meeting, like who is gonna steal something from you. I don't think this is our case. I'm always happy if I can connect with somebody from the ecosystem. I am confident that we have stories, background, ups and downs, to say it nicely, to share. And I'm always happy if there is somebody on the other side who is open to do the same, to learn from each other. Together we are stronger. I'm absolutely thrilled when there is initiative to build joint activities, long-term cooperations. And I would like to accent that this is not just pretty words or not just some kind of nice speech. We are actively working on projects that they are joint activities all around the globe, and I've never seen it as a threat. I think all of us in Europe, some of us are bigger small countries and some of us are smaller small countries, but all of us are in a small ecosystem. If we want to build a big wall around us and pretend that we can achieve everything alone and ours is the best, be my guest, but I don't see any value in that. So in my opinion, and also I can share the opinion of Czech Invest, cooperation is the key. And the only threat is that you close yourself up and your mind up and you say, like, I'm the best one and nobody can show me anything better.
I'm totally convinced with the idea that we should look for synergies and not things that can divide us. This is very typical also for the startup mindset. We kind of, try to work together, support each other in what we're doing. This old competitive mindset is a bit, I don't know, something that we might see in the corporation world, but I'm very happy that we don't see it in the startup world. And I wanted to add also something else, because I think that undoubtedly an important factor for this fast pace of the development in the Central and Eastern European ecosystem are the founders, a new generation of, let's call them digital intellectuals, who are now thinking more and more internationally and globally than ever, building international connections, being able to raise funds from abroad, attracting partners and investors and customers from all around the world. This has been critical. Yulia, I wanted to tap into something which I find very special, especially about the Albanian ecosystem, because I was very impressed by it. From your resume, I see that you're being very actively involved in two very contrasting ecosystems. So on one hand, we have the super developed Berlin, and then you have Tirana, which is still in a way in its infancy. How important do you think is now here the role for importing know-how and exchanging know-how and models, best practices from abroad?
Yeah, great question. Very important. Indeed, the ecosystems are quite different, and I, of course, have to admit Albania, also Western Balkans, the Southeastern Europe, are still lagging behind, and that's why I said I don't want to spoil the party, because all these success that we're seeing with the unicorns at CEE are definitely very good models, but are not representative of the Southeastern Europe. And bringing this know-how and the expertise of these generations, such as also myself, that have grown personally, professionally, in the entrepreneurial side abroad, but still have ties with the, let's say in this case, Albanian ecosystem, of course, is an advantage. I see it as such, and I always try my best to exploit it as such. When I never left Albania. So when I was being positioned in Germany, I always aimed to keep ties with the Albanian ecosystem by bringing new technologies, creating co-working space for collaboration, and now also a new venture. And I think, of course, it brings back the model, the culture, the technology development. And I think it's a trend that it's also increasing. We see more and more also young entrepreneurs that also want to build products with teams in Albania or in Kosovo or in North Macedonia. And this is definitely an added value. Of course, it should also come with better structures for investment and fundraising. But I guess this is also another topic, but definitely an added value to have these ties. And I see an increasing trend.
Julien, when I was looking at your resume, I saw that you also have quite an impressive international experience, traveling, I think, in more than 80 countries back then in your corporate career. But you were also back then a founder in Palo Alto, and you attended the YC Combinator experience that you then brought back to the Central and Eastern Europe ecosystem by building first the ABC accelerator in Ljubljana, and then later on in Zagreb, at the Rouge capital, you have your own acceleration program, which is designed by the model of Y Combinator. So I wanted to ask you, in your experience, to what extent could we apply successful models from the Silicon Valley in Central and Eastern Europe, and to what extent do we need to adapt them to our reality?
So I mentioned to you a bit earlier on what I believe are the three pillars of a successful ecosystem. One is talent, two is money, three is corporate merge and acquisition scene. I think we clearly miss the third part in Europe. It's very interesting. I can tell you a very precise example, which you will understand very well. One of our portfolio company, a very, very successful one, tried for 2 years to get into an operator, a TV operator in Europe as a service provider. For 2 years, this company told them, look, we don't need your solution. We will build it ourselves. They came back to those guys 2 years after, having spent 25 or 30 millions in development, and said, listen, we cannot do it. Can you please provide the service? This very same company started talking 6 months ago to the same type of operators in the US. They have a contract for service in their hands. Not only this, at the moment they signed the contract, they got a phone call from the corporate development guy from the same company, because he wanted to talk about acquisition. Okay, so you can see with this very, very, very specific example exactly what we are missing in Europe at the moment. The big corporation, which are an essential part of what I call the startup food chain, where the sharks eat a bit of a smaller fish, which eats a bit of a smaller fish that was eating plankton before. We are missing this part because big corporation in Europe don't understand innovation. It's a disaster. I mean, I'm speaking as a venture capitalist. I'm trying to preach, and with my corporate career in the past, I still have access to some pretty preeminent CEO of big companies. The guys have no clue, and they don't understand. I said, buy those companies because you're gonna create value for your own company, and we miss that too much in Europe at the moment. I'd like to just comment. I think it's Beata that made a point of having no walls and that kind of things. I'm a big preacher of that. We invite to our demo days. We have now about 170 VCs that we invite. We do a lot of things to share, and I think this is something that is working very well. The absence of wall. Yes, she's right. The ecosystem is a bit fragmented, but I think both companies and investors are doing pretty well. That was a side comment, and I think this is something we should be pretty pleased about. But I think, in my opinion, again, a shorter answer to your question is we need somehow to let corporate CEOs that innovation is good and they should buy more companies. And with this, I think we'll have closed the loop, and we will only at this point, we will be able to really compete with the Silicon Valley ecosystem.
Great point, Julien. I see Sergio nodding back all the time while he's listening to you, and I think it's a direct experience exactly with this reality. I had another question for you, Sergio, but would you follow up on that? Would you agree? Do you see that? Do you see also models which can be applied here?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of the missing corporate acquisitions, I definitely think that is the case here. I think, if we look at Europe, it's called the old continent. And if we look at the very innovative companies, we don't have that many as opposed to the US. So indeed, we might have that missing link of corporate acquisitions and maybe adopters. But on the other side, I think we can build, and within our ecosystems, we can build products that can actually compete at the international level, and we can compete on equal footing. Now, the only issue is how do we get the products out as fast as possible, and how do we do proper go-to-market, and how do we scale the business? I think this is still one of the things that in our countries we still need to learn, because if we look at the US, they've had so many examples of successful companies that have started from a very early stage. They've scaled them up, and they've done IPOs, and they've listed their companies to the public. And in our local ecosystems, that kind of experience is a bit missing. Now, the good thing is that we start having these lighthouse companies. In Romania, we have UiPath, who's gone the full mile, and they've developed from a very small team to having thousands of employees and being a public company. So definitely, we need more examples of that, and we need more companies doing that in our local ecosystems.
Speaking about the full mile of IPOs and acquisitions, I'm going to create a direct bridge to my next question. So, as we counted them in the report, 34 unicorns from Central and Eastern Europe, 5 of which have already exited. So, in this sense, how do you see unicorns exited or not yet, or IPOing, adding value to the local economies? Do you think we could observe at some point the birth of the soul, of the local people mafias, like UiPath mafia and Rolik mafia?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sorry to just hop in, but I was also thinking of the Skype mafia, because this is also something that helped the ecosystem grow. I think just the fact that these companies are now going public, and just the fact that they have now access to capital, and there is more capital available in the ecosystem, helps companies with access to that capital, but also it helps them have mentors who know how to build a company to scale, know how to do it efficiently, and put processes in place to sustain the company. And yeah, I think it ultimately helps the local ecosystem, because it provides access to people with that know-how and that experience that they can share with the local entrepreneurs.
So thank you, Sergio. Beata, Julien, you were also speaking about talent and mindset. Do you see that happening already?
On my behalf, on the scene in Czech Republic, I can speak that definitely it's helping. That firstly, you have founders that they are sharing the story how to become big, and without actually the sprinkle with in a true way. So they are sharing also the negative side effects and actually the shortcuts or the problems that they have, and also the positive. So this is definitely something that we can thank to the founders that in Czech Republic build big companies, because they are not just a mentor but also a role model, like how to do that. And a big thanks to them that in Czech Republic, thank God, they are giving back to the community. They are actively going back to events and sharing even sensitive topics, like how some deals didn't work out with the first investments, how it impacted their future development, some kind of this is some kind of mental education or mindset education, the founders, and this is absolutely significantly helping. Not to mention that the best successful startups are becoming founders themselves, and they are absolutely putting small companies on fast track, because not only they are giving money, they are also giving impact. They are giving all the experience that you cannot learn from anything. There is no book that it will tell you what you should do. So I think I'm absolutely thrilled that this is happening in Czech Republic. I see that, and the founders pouring back money and experience as well.
You're muted.
Mute. Yeah.
Julien, do you observe that as well? And maybe we can also bring up the conversation on a bit supranational level, where we don't speak only about the effect in the local economies, but is it also affecting internationally? So from my perspective, an example like UiPath is definitely having a huge positive effect also on the Bulgarian ecosystem. Julien?
I mean, listen, let's not hide ourselves from the reality here. It's all about money in the end. Okay, I'm sorry to be the party breaker here. Okay, the more money you pour into doing something in general, over the past 1,000 years that the world has existed, you generally get better results. I mean, it's no big rocket science. When Facebook went IPO, I think this created 1,000 millionaires in 1 minute. And those people are just pouring money back into the ecosystem. When UiPath did so well, I know some of my colleagues in the VC world returned 2,000 times their fund to their investors. Guess what they are doing as fund managers? They're going to put the money they made back into a fund, and they're going to go back to the same investor to whom they return tons of money and say, listen, I'm doing the next fund. You did very well with me on this one. Are you investing in the next one? Guess what the answer is going to be? So it's more success, more money. It's a complete virtuous circle. And the more money, the more success. I mean, that's how it works, how the capitalistic world works, whether we like it or not. So it's a rather simple equation, and I'm sorry to be super down to earth here.
I think we need that from time to time. So it's actually, let's call it virtuous capital, not venture capital, coming back.
Yes.
Very good. We don't have much time, so maybe we can try to keep it a bit shorter, because I have so many questions that I want to ask you. We will not manage all of them, but still, moving to the next one. So we see that now the interest by international VCs, mostly from the US and also from the Western Europe, increasing lately. Julian, maybe you will confirm that valuations are going totally high. They're going totally crazy. How will this affect the startup ecosystem? Are the US investors maybe a competition to what you're doing?
Well, actually, the angle I would like to see it is that regarding the funding, the scene, I agree with Julian, it's all about money. Now the idea is like, how do we structure the money and how do we create mechanisms so that we can also have sustainable ecosystem in Central and Eastern Europe, and not the talent go abroad, and not that they're bought and the big sharks they eat us up and then they are draining us. So I think this is also the real deal here. Of course, putting the money, but putting it in channels that we can also have sustainable ecosystems. Now, what we see is that the investment, 90% is coming from foreign investors. Ideally, what I'd like to see is how but also a lot of money from local stakeholders. How can we create mechanisms to also incentivize, and structure this local funding in cooperation with the international one? Where I see the added value, especially for international investment, is in the scale ups, so in the later phase. I think this is a stage which we are still trying to breach in the Eastern Europe. And I think that particularly at these phases, the international investment gives an added value. However, going back to the money is how can we create mechanisms that also local funding, and especially these startups that we mentioned that have raised themselves, how can we incentivize them to create this mechanism for better local structures and sustainable ecosystem in Eastern Europe? So I think this is for me maybe idealistic, but this is also the perspective we should be looking at, and of course giving models to other smaller countries that they can replicate such structures.
Thank you. Is the big question here, how do we keep the IP in Central and Eastern Europe?
How do you keep IP? How do we incentivize also local stakeholders in the funding scenes and not solely rely on the 90% of investors coming as big sharks and eating us up? This is a $1 million question.
Beata, how do we keep the IP here locally? Is global entrepreneurship maybe a good solution here?
That's a good question. Of course, I have a short microwaving answer for that. You just put it 2 minutes, heat it, and it's easy to use. I'm kidding. Honestly, how do we keep the IP? I think that's really important. We are working with our startups that they know that they should work on this question from the beginning. That building a company means not just building the product, but also creating a company that it's safe, and every single aspect of the company is protected. And the value is not only in the product, but also in the IP itself. That IP is a valuable asset in your company, and you should protect it. And you should think of your startup from the beginning that you are gonna build it big, and raise the question with experts. What does that mean if my company does global? Because at one point you're gonna have external companies you work with. Your team most probably is gonna go global. You're not gonna have only team in one building. You're gonna have many hopefully companies you work with, and some of them are going to be your distributors, some of them are going to be your competitors, some of them are going to be in a shady side. You don't know even who is this, is that these relationships are developing. So I think it's really important from the beginning to know this is an issue and you should work on it. And what does that mean for the future? And I think some of the companies know that, and they are doing it well. They are protecting it, and the knowledge is remaining at the core company, but still we need to go global.
I can actually very easily direct the question also to Sergio at this point, because it is, if we have to start thinking about it from the beginning, this is already in the acceleration process that you're doing at your program.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in the acceleration process, you definitely look at the IP and the products you develop. One interesting thing we see is, as we run our acceleration programs, is that a lot of the time we focus on specific directions that we take. So, for example, we have a project called Big Hub for Europe, in which we do
I'm just going to ask you to keep it a bit short, because we have only a couple of minutes, and I wanted to ask also Julien about his opinion.
Yeah, so I wanted to say that if we target a specific vertical, we just go with the blockchain space, we accumulate knowledge in that domain. I think this is one of the best ways that we can help companies. How do we protect blockchain companies? How do we protect the IP that they create? The more experience we have in the particular domain, the better we can serve the companies. Yeah.
Julien, final words. How do we keep the IP here in our region?
This is a question I'm totally uninterested about. I think I think if we are trying to keep IPs and this kind of fights, I mean, nothing is going to move. I think it's a totally backward fight, in my opinion. But I think we are going too close to a political debate here.
Very interesting perspective. I'm sure that most of you will actually, who are watching us today, would like to follow up on this. You can do that also using, I guess, the channels of the Wolf Summit. I saw that they have a very cool chat app that I've been also trying to use to connect internationally with others. This is the end of our discussion. Thank you very much for being here. There are many aspects that we can still discuss. We just started the conversation. Let's continue it in the other sessions and also in the chat and private conversations. Thank you very much.
Good job,
Thank you so
Irena.
much,
Good job.
everyone.